No S, WASP. Carol's going to go first, and this is Carol Selfridge from Hawkins Bar. You're on.
Hi, I told you were going to hear from me again. I first thought of going into the WASP when I saw something in the paper about the fact that they were taking women. Jacqueline Cochran advertised for taking the women in. And I couldn't go in any of the other services because you couldn't have children under 14 years of age, and mine were 2 and 4. Well, when I said that I'd like to go in, my mother said, well, only if you'll let me take care of them. Of course, that's what I expected, but it was nice of her to offer. Anyway, I know I talk so loud anyway. Anyway, I don't think all of you know what how the WASP originated. First, they started with the WAFs, which was Nancy Love got about 200 women together that had over 500 hours and multi-engine, and persuaded the powers to be to let them help the Army, so that the Air Force, so that the men could be released to go overseas. Well, they thought they had let the women fly the little Lycombe, that pronounced right, and the Piper Cubs. They couldn't fly anything bigger, of course, but they could help out a little bit. Well, they started flying, and then Jacqueline Cochran worked with Hap Arnold in getting the women flying, training the women for it. But we had to have 45 hours before we could even apply. So I went over to Blythe. I had to be 250 miles in from the coast. I lived at Redondo Beach. And there was a bunch of us from Los Angeles area went out to Quartzsite, Arizona, which nobody knew of in those days. Now you know what it is. Anyway, we had a little field out there. We got our 45 hours in, and then we applied, and out of 5,000 women applying, I think it was 1,800 that were accepted, and out of that there was 1,074 that made it all the way through. We were sent to Sweetwater, and we got 6 months of training, supposedly the same thing the boys were getting. We had 90 hours of primary, and then we had basic training in the BTs with the instruments, and then the AT, advanced training in the ATs. And it was amazing the number of women that looked at our list of check-off list and said, that's too big for me, and went home. We were civil service, so we could quit and go home, or if you were washed out, you were said goodbye. You weren't given money to go home. You weren't given anything else. They took your clothes that they had loaned to you, the zoot suits, fancy clothes that we wore. One size fits all, and so the girl that was in my squadron, my last name began with a B at that time, and hers was B. She was just barely got in at 5 foot. I just barely got in at 6 foot, and we marched side by side in the same size suit. Anyway, the men claimed that we got in because it was glamorous. Anyway, I got out in June. In the process of training, I was in a PT 17 coming in for a landing in high winds. They had to grab my wingtips and pick me around, tie me down before I could turn the engine off because the wind was so strong. And there was a couple of the fellows had flown accidentally, on purpose, landed at Sweetwater to be where all the girls were, and they wouldn't let them take off. It was too windy. We were all coming in flying in our basic trainers. Anyway, I was sent on to over by Bakersfield at Gardner Field, and I was there for a while and basically just test hopping the BTs when they were working on them. And at one time they decided they'd better have the mechanic go up with the pilot to make sure he did a good job. If any of you have flown the BT 13s and 15s, they rattle a little bit. And I went up and I did all the necessary turns and flips and slow rolls and a few other things, and he came down white as a sheet and he says, "Oh, I'm going to tighten those bolts better the next time." Anyway, then I was shipped over to Victorville, where we were checked out in the AT-11s and flew bombardier cadets over their targets over there. Now, in the girls that were flying, if anything happened to them, they were just their family notified, and the family had to pay to have the bodies shipped home, and we weren't given any compensation whatsoever. Out of all of the gals flying, there was 37 that ended up losing their lives. Most, I think, was after they got out of training. But I happened to be in a very bad position myself one time. I was with my instrument instructor coming in for a landing, and he said, "Oh, look at that." And here came a girl from basic advanced trainer. She had just gone into advanced training. Another gal that had just coming back from her cross country to finish off, and they were both looking in the opposite direction and ran into one another right in front of us, which was the only accident that I heard of while I was in training. We had very few women in accidents. The others mostly was out after they've been sent out on their assignments. I don't know. As I said, I was going to give just the basics of what happened as far as the WASPs are concerned. Kay was in a lot longer than I and did a lot more things, and she has a lot more to tell you about.
Thank you, Carol. I have slides, and if you can't see the screen, why don't you take this opportunity to pick up your chair and move, because what I have is a slideshow of the airplanes that we flew, and she told pretty much about the background. But I'd say pick up your chair and move where you can see the screen.